Even though I'm using Copic markers in this video, it doesn't matter what brand of markers you're using, whether it's Spectrum Noir or whatever it is. We're going to be doing some dynamic coloring for this diverse anime manga multi-charactered poster. The poster is a little different. It's not like you have the characters standing in one place. It's kind of abstract the way it's arranged, but that's part of the planning. You kind of have to plan everything before you jump in with the actual coloring. You have to plan even how the characters are going to be lit, all the highlights, bounce lights, all those things, because they add like this extra nice dynamic dimension to the piece. You have to decide the size of the characters and where they're going to be placed, because that kind of ties into, at least for this case, the popularities of the characters, because you want to make sure that the most recognizable characters are easiest to see on the piece. Then you got line variations where characters that seem to be bigger, larger, or seem to be closer to the viewer would be inked with thicker lines versus characters farther away or smaller in size. And then there are things you don't ink because maybe you want to form some kind of effect while coloring, whether that may be some of the lighting, the light sources, like you would see me coloring with fire here. I'm not doing like line work for the actual fire. There are styles where you would want to do that, but in this case I'm going to show you a way, which is something I prefer, to draw fire without line work. And then there are also some cases where you don't draw lines to emphasize the intensity of some light sources, or to not draw it because you want the character to seem a little bit blurry, where some parts of the illustration are sharper than others, and you can have that be without lines to emphasize that maybe that's blurry, or to show some atmospheric pressure within the piece. Imagine a character is in like a red fog. If you were closer to the character, it'll be more defined so you can see more lines. But if they're further away, maybe some kind of red fog, the character will seem completely red, even though they might be wearing colors that don't have any red in it. Same rules can apply to some intense lighting. So the characters that'll be closer to the fire here, you would see a lot of yellow lighting on them, very warm and orangey and yellow, even though you'll still be able to see tints and hues of your actual colors. But it's all walking a fine line. You really need to practice doing this a lot. Maybe look at some illustrations or images, whether it be real life photos or your favorite creators that do similar things, and try to study what you see and then apply it to your own style and your own work. I used similar techniques in the previous video, but there I was just coloring one character. Here I'm coloring a whole crew. Feel me? So I'm here putting in the yellows for the fire, and I'm trying to put something really saturated, bright yellow, and I'm just forming weird shapes. Then once you go in with this yellow, this very clear yellow, I go in with a darker yellow. And really, depending on the flame, you can color it the same way. I'll just go from the brightest version of the color. In this case, we're going yellow. But if the flame was blue, you have the same approach. So you can see here, I'm going with a slightly maybe more saturated, dirtier yellow. In some cases, if you want it to blend better, you can use the colorless blender and lay down the colorless blender on the paper to make it a little wet before you actually put in the colors. That just helps the blending a little better. But in some cases, you may not need to do so, especially if the colors are so close. In this case, they are. So here, it already kind of looks like fire. In some cases, you can use the darker version, the darker hue, to form like a shape. This one is not as dirty. This is a little more honey. And then after the honey, we're going with something way more saturated, orange even. So this is the fourth color I'm using. Light yellow, something dark and dirty, something a little more saturated, now like orange, really saturated, and then from here I'm just going darker. So we're going from like a white to yellow to orange to red, and in this case that's pretty much brown even. One of the last things I like to do is just put little particles that are burning. It's almost like it's burning the air around. That's how hot it is, and that just adds a little extra oomph to the flames. And then that's like a light source that I'm going to use to color the rest of the characters, as you can see. Again, put in some yellow, the character making the flames. That is a Yumi from Saigami. And that's going to affect, especially it's going to shine a whole lot on her metal armor that she's wearing. But it's going to affect all the characters there. So this is kind of stylistic, and you just have the same approach. Here, I'm going to have a blue light source behind the characters at the top right. So you just take the same approach and keep going. I try to keep the illustration pretty colorful, so I'm using mostly the primary colors here, keeping the characters from Saturday AM very alive, using yellow, blue, and I'll use red at the bottom right. You have the character Hammer. His hands turn into literal metal hammers, so there's going to be a lot of reflection there. You can see like some highlights from the flames on his hammer hand. Going back to the top, putting some blue highlights on the characters, and this is just how I start. Now laying in the skin. Usually for skin tone, if the character is light-skinned person, I usually start with the E11 and then just go down from there and go darker and darker. And if the person was a dark-toned person, a dark-skinned person, say a black person, I use the E15. Here, this character is keeping it alive and vibrant, so we'll be able to see their actual colors regardless of the intense other light sources hitting them from other sides, like the blue from top right, the yellow on the left, and like the red at the bottom right. But there's something, maybe you can imagine a white fluorescent light or some kind of light that allows their original colors shine, hitting them from the front. That's why the whole illustration is not just consumed by light sources. It's like there's the yellow, the blue, and the red, but then a balanced light source coming from the front, allowing us to see the character's actual colors. But seeing the characters in all these different colors, the highlights and all of that just keeps everything dynamic. The closer they are to the light source, you have like an atmospheric pressure to a degree where it's even. Maybe if it was close to the blue, it's bluer than usual. If it's close to the flames that you would see with a Yumi, it's hotter and warmer than usual. And you just have to keep those things in mind. You want the illustration to have a little bit of a gradient feel. You don't want it to be too jarring. There are some cases where it should be jarring, where it's going from that blue light source or yellow light source or red light source to like the normal tone. But in some cases, you might want to keep it simple. In some cases, the light source is so intense that it just overtakes the whole illustration and it's all completely warm. And I go into more detail about that concept or approach in the previous video. And I start with the E15 for black characters and just keep going down the same trajectory and go use maybe an E18 to shade them, coloring the character dark skinned, but you can still see a lot of the yellow light hitting the character on the left because of the flames. And you see the character from Paradise Down completely engulfed by the flames. He's going to be very warm, warmer than the rest. And Clock here is just going to be a little warm. So we're going to see more of original colors, more so than the character from Paradise Down, Whyt. He's going to be a whole lot warmer because he's right now. In fact, he's inside the flames, to be honest. Here you see Dante from Soul Beat. We're going to see a little bit of blue coming on the right and a little bit of yellow coming on the left because he's right in the middle of it. All these characters are from different series within Saturday AM, and I'll talk about that a little bit because this illustration was just to celebrate that diversity and celebrate all the characters on our roster and doing something special. And we've actually used this illustration as the greeting illustration for our latest app, which I'll also talk about. Right now I'm coloring in characters from Massively Multiplayer World of Ghosts. There's a character Nilray. This is our Indian American lead from Massively Multiplayer World of Ghosts. So you can think of it as our Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon type series. And the little orange ball floating, kind of like a Slimer from Ghostbusters type thing. Or you can think of as Pikachu, in this case, is Viper Neo. In this case, they deal with ghosts versus digital monsters or pocket monsters. They deal with ghosts. Ghosts are basically like video game characters come to life, and what he's holding in his hand is like a controller. And the character, the blue character at the top right, like the guy with the dreadlocks yelling, that's Daedalus Bond, also a ghost. So these are all from our Saturday AM roster. In fact, our Saturday AM app is actually free, available for iOS, Android, and Amazon. On the app, you'll be able to read Saturday AM for free. The latest 3 issues will always be available for free, along with the latest issue of Fan Art Friday. Fan Art Friday is one of our newest magazines that just celebrates fan art overall. The first issue was on Demon Slayer. It'll talk fan art in general, art challenges, art contests. Saturday AM issues would contain series from our roster, which include Apple Black, interviews from popular industry professional figures. We're going to have a new format within the magazine where before, series in the magazine would kind of sporadically show and have installments within the magazine, but now every quarter we're going to have the same series run consecutively in the magazine. So for the first quarter, we have series like Hammer, our African shonen manga, Orshus, and Tender Loving Punch, and more, and they will all run consecutively throughout the first quarter. And then the second quarter would be a new set of series. Apple Black will return with content from Volume 3 in the third quarter and potentially the fourth quarter, so there will just be a lot of Apple Black content starting from the third quarter, probably to the end of the year, leading to the eventual release of Apple Black Volume 3. There's a lot of stuff on the app that you guys can go check out, including Saturday PM, which is a more mature version of Saturday AM, where we have the more mature titles and series where things are a little more 18 plus. Our subscription is $3.99 a month or $36.99 for a whole year. And the subscription will specifically give you access to all the magazines we produce. There are some in-app purchases, like for things where maybe you want to catch up with specific series that are running inside a magazine so that you can know exactly what's going on when you're reading it inside the magazine. We call them retro packs. And the retro packs will just have at least 2 to 3 chapters in a pack. So for instance, there's a retro pack right now, the Apple Black retro pack, that has the new chapters in there. The new chapters that I created, Apple Black Chapter 1, which most of you have seen, but the remastered version of it. Then Apple Black Chapter 1.1 and 1.2, all in one retro pack there available. And that's about 100 pages. So all the series kind of have either retro packs and in some cases full volumes. And we'll keep updating the app, which is the cool thing. It's going to get better and better. So I love to see you guys go check it out, go download it. I've never wanted you guys to download an app more than this app. A lot of our fans have been wanting this. I've been getting a lot of notes saying, finally, you know what I mean? Finally, you know what I mean? People are really digging it, so that's good to see. The app, I believe, is easy to access. It looks really good. We are very proud of all our efforts, and we've been working hard to make sure this happens. So 2020 is the year. We're heading in the right direction, I believe. Saturday AM, the world's most diverse manga anthology, manga magazine, shonen manga, seinen manga, whatever you want. I think we did good by starting this revolution and trying to evolve the idea of the independent creator and what they're capable of doing within this space. We're going to try and do things with independent creators, things that are only available to like big companies. So we're trying to change that trajectory and create more opportunities for creatives. But got a little sidetracked. Back to this illustration. Also keep in mind that most of these videos, it takes time, it takes practice. Sometimes you need to look at reference. In fact, one of the future videos, really close, either the next video or the video after that, we're gonna go on, how I use reference for some of my colored illustrations, which I think would be a doozy. So now I'm putting in all the colors. I use a cool gray for most of the whites. In some cases where maybe you can see the characters are closer to, let's say, the yellow, the warm, I might use a warm gray instead. It's kind of up to you because it's not an exact science. It'll be a whole lot better when you look at real life illustrations and study references and things of that nature, where you get more comfortable and you've planned everything out. It just makes your execution much better. Then I use darker cool grays to fill in blacks, but I use like flat blacks for the most of it, especially in like the darker areas, just to give it a clear, defined shape or clearer message to the viewer as to what I'm actually drawing. But that's done obviously in the inking part. See, using warm grays from like the yellow, and then I'm transitioning into a cooler gray, coloring in the hair. Again, not coloring over the parts I want to leave white, not coloring over the yellows as much because you really want that warmth to remain there. In some cases, you can even go back on the orange hair with a yellow again, just to keep it warm. Why is my head in the shot? Now I'm just using the appropriate colors for the characters. You got Bully Eater, Clock Striker, Hammer, obviously Apple Black, Saigami, massively multiplayer World of Ghosts, Crunch Time, Titan King, as you can see here, this big beast on the top right, Soul Beat, Spoon, putting in the blue lights. It's cool. Now coloring the Daedalus Bond for Massively Multiplayer World of Ghost. Again, I'm making sure not to go over the yellows too much, and if I do, I come back with the yellows to go over it, just to keep it warm. Going in with some white ink, some light hitting the iron, making it shine, making it feel a little more metallic. You don't do it all the time. I'm putting some highlights in the eyes, just a little bit, to make the characters pop, make them feel a little more alive. So don't be afraid to mix up the media every now and then. Going over some lines I don't want to show. The fire in the fingertips are going to cover some of the line work, so I go in with some white ink. Then here, coloring in his dreads with a Pentel brush tip, a Pentel pocket brush. Then I'll go over it with the cool grays. Then as you can see, his dreadlocks going back are kind of getting lost. So the line work is getting thinner. In some cases, I'm not even drawing the lines anymore. And I'm just going to use the cool grays to fill it in. And it's closer to the light source, so I'm not using the actual flat black ink as much anymore. I'm just using the cool grays. And I'm even using lighter cool grays, so C1 and C3, barely touching the C5. Most of you who use Copics know what I'm talking about. Like I said, these apply to other brush markers, so just find the equivalent of the brush marker that you have. Coloring, you want to go over the illustration with alcohol enough to where you don't see the stroke marks as much, just to keep the whole illustration clean, smooth, as best as you can. And that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this illustration. Don't forget to check out the app. Detroit, smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. Follow us on social media. Links to everything you could possibly need will be in the description below. 2 free months of Skillshare. You're welcome. My Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. Check out my other videos. Whyt Manga, and I'm outie.